strike and shockwaves if the United States and Israel attack Iran's nuclear program.
Welcome to the bigger perspective.
The night would begin quietly. Financial screens flicker before sunrise in Tokyo. Oil traders in London notice futures climbing. In Washington and Tel Aviv, emergency briefings move from theoretical to immediate. Then the headline spreads across the globe. The United States and Israel have launched coordinated strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities. Within minutes, the world is holding its breath. Because this will not simply be a military operation. It will be a geopolitical earthquake, a decision sending pressure waves through energy markets, alliance systems, military postures, and the fragile architecture of international order. The question would not just be what was hit. The question would be, what happens next? Iran's nuclear program has shaped Middle Eastern politics for more than 2 decades. Tehran insists its enrichment activities are for civilian energy and medical research. Israel and Western governments argue that enrichment capacity shortens the pathway to a weapon. Iran is a signatory to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. Inspections have fluctuated, agreements have been signed and later abandoned. Sanctions have tightened and loosened. For Israel, the issue is existential. For the United States, it is strategic. For Iran, it is sovereignty and deterrence. This is not a simple dispute. It is layered with history, mistrust, ideology, and power politics. Scenario 1. A limited, contained strike. The objective: delay nuclear capability. No regime change, no ground invasion, a narrow military action followed by diplomatic recalibration. Iran's response becomes the critical variable. If escalation threatens regime stability, Tehran may choose symbolic retaliation, but avoid full confrontation. Markets react instantly. Roughly 20% of the world's seaborne oil passes through the Strait of Hormuz. Even perceived instability can move prices dramatically. Energy futures surge, shipping insurance rises, global headlines intensify. But if escalation remains contained, markets stabilize. The world absorbs the shock. Scenario 2. Regional escalation. Iran maintains a significant missile inventory and regional partnerships. Retaliatory strikes could target Israel directly or US bases across the Gulf. Shipping slows. Air defense systems activate. Civil aviation reroutes. Energy markets do not simply spike, they destabilize. Fuel prices rise, inflation intensifies, central banks face renewed pressure. Emerging economies feel the strain first. Conflicts rarely widen by grand design, they widen through miscalculation. A missile misses its target, a response is misinterpreted, an escalation unfolds that no one initially intended. Scenario 3. A deeper strategic shift. If facilities are heavily damaged, Tehran could conclude that vulnerability invites attack. Instead of retreating from nuclear capability, it may accelerate underground development. The global non-proliferation regime weakens. Regional powers reassess their own deterrence strategies. International rules are tested. When preventive force becomes normalized, global order shifts. The focus begins with oil, but it does not end there. Shipping insurers reprice risk, freight costs climb, supply chains slow. Manufacturing, aviation, agriculture all feel pressure. Households feel it at the pump, then at the grocery store. Inflation spreads quietly. Conflict in one region becomes cost worldwide. Geopolitics can feel abstract. Missiles, markets, alliances. But beneath strategy lies human consequence. Families watching the sky, flights cancelled, schools closed, military families across multiple nations bracing for deployment. What do we know? Energy markets react rapidly to Gulf instability. Iran retains retaliatory capability. Alliances would be tested immediately. What we do not know is how leaders under pressure would calculate risk. A strike on Iran's nuclear program would not be isolated. It would be a stress test of global systems, energy security, alliance credibility, non-proliferation norms, market stability. Wars begin with explosions, but their consequences echo in supply chains, diplomatic chambers, defense budgets, and household expenses thousands of miles away. In an interconnected world, no major conflict is ever local. And when the first aircraft turns toward its target, it is not only the region that holds its breath, the world does too. What are your thoughts on today's analysis? We'd value your perspective. Share your insights respectfully in the comments below. Thoughtful discussion makes these conversations stronger.
Does Iran insist on advancing its nuclear program, even under years of sanctions, diplomatic isolation, and the threat of military confrontation? And why are the United States, Israel, much of Europe, and several regional powers determined to stop it? At first glance, it appears to be a simple dispute about nuclear weapons. But the reality is more complex. It is a story shaped by Cold War politics, revolution, regional rivalry, international law, energy security, and mutual distrust that has built up over decades. Understanding this issue requires stepping back from headlines and rhetoric. It requires looking at how Iran's nuclear ambitions began, how they evolved, and why different actors interpret them in fundamentally different ways. Iran's nuclear program did not begin in defiance of the West. It began with Western support. In the 1950s, under the US Atoms for Peace initiative, the United States helped Iran develop civilian nuclear technology. At the time, Iran was ruled by Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, a close American ally. The goal was energy diversification and scientific development. That cooperation ended after the 1979 Islamic Revolution, when the Shah was overthrown and Iran became an Islamic republic under Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini. Relations with the United States collapsed, especially after the US Embassy hostage crisis. Throughout the 1980s, during the devastating Iran-Iraq War, Iran felt strategically isolated. Iraq used chemical weapons during the conflict, and international response was limited. Many analysts argue that this period shaped Iranian leadership's long-term security thinking. Survival became central. In the 1990s and early 2000s, concerns intensified when previously undeclared nuclear facilities were revealed in Natanz and Arak. The International Atomic Energy Agency began investigating compliance with the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which Iran had signed in 1968. In 2015, after years of negotiations, Iran and 6 world powers signed the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. The deal limited Iran's uranium enrichment levels, reduced its stockpile, and imposed strict inspections in exchange for sanctions relief. In 2018, the United States withdrew from the agreement, reimposed sanctions, and Iran gradually resumed higher levels of enrichment. That withdrawal marked a turning point. Trust eroded further, and the diplomatic framework weakened. At the heart of this dispute lies a central question. Is Iran pursuing nuclear weapons, or is it exercising its legal right to peaceful nuclear energy? Iran's official position is consistent. It states that its nuclear program is for civilian purposes, particularly electricity generation and medical research. Iranian leaders often emphasize that nuclear weapons are religiously prohibited under a fatwa reportedly issued by Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, countries are allowed to develop nuclear energy for peaceful purposes, provided they comply with inspection requirements and do not pursue weapons. Iran argues that it is asserting its sovereign rights. It also contends that sanctions are unjust and politically motivated. Critics, however, raise several concerns. Uranium enrichment is a dual-use technology. The same process that produces fuel for nuclear power plants can, at higher purity levels, produce material suitable for weapons. In recent years, the International Atomic Energy Agency has confirmed that Iran has enriched uranium to levels significantly higher than those required for civilian power generation. Second, Iran has previously failed to disclose certain facilities and activities, raising questions about transparency. From Israel's perspective, the concern is existential. Israeli officials argue that a nuclear-armed Iran would fundamentally alter regional security. The United States frames the issue around non-proliferation and regional stability. European countries generally support diplomatic solutions and have attempted to preserve elements of the 2015 agreement. Experts remain divided. Some argue Iran's nuclear progress is a bargaining tool. Others believe Iran seeks at least the capability to build a weapon quickly if needed. The International Atomic Energy Agency has not publicly concluded that Iran is currently building a nuclear weapon. However, it has documented enrichment levels that reduce the time required to produce weapons-grade material if a decision were made. That ambiguity fuels mistrust on all sides.
This issue matters far beyond Iran. If Iran were to acquire nuclear weapons, many analysts believe it could trigger a regional arms race. Countries such as Saudi Arabia have indicated they would seek similar capabilities if Iran crossed that threshold. The Middle East already faces overlapping conflicts involving proxy forces, regional rivalries, and external powers. There are also economic implications. Sanctions on Iran affect global oil markets. Iran possesses some of the world's largest proven oil and gas reserves. Alliances are also at stake. The nuclear issue intersects with broader geopolitical competition. At its core, this is not only about nuclear technology, it is about trust, credibility, and regional balance of power. As of recent public reports, Iran continues enriching uranium beyond the limits set by the 2015 agreement. Negotiations to restore or replace the agreement have faced repeated setbacks. The International Atomic Energy Agency continues monitoring, though access levels have fluctuated. Sanctions remain in place, significantly impacting Iran's economy. No formal agreement currently governs Iran's program in the way the 2015 deal once did. The situation remains dynamic but unresolved. The question of Iran's nuclear ambitions is not a simple clash of good and bad actors. It is a layered conflict shaped by history, fear, strategy, and power. Iran sees security, sovereignty, and leverage. Its critics see proliferation, risk, and regional instability. Between those positions lies a fragile space where diplomacy competes with distrust. In the nuclear age, capability alone can shift the balance of power, and when trust is scarce, even ambiguity can become a source of tension. The future of this dispute remains uncertain, but its roots and its implications are clear enough to demand careful attention. For decades, the Strait of Hormuz was discussed in the language of contingency. War games modeled its closure. Intelligence briefings analyzed its vulnerabilities. Energy economists calculated its exposure risk. It was the world's most dangerous maritime choke point. In theory. That theory has now collided with reality. Military confrontation in the Gulf has moved beyond covert exchanges and calibrated deterrence. Air defense systems are active. Naval assets are maneuvering with operational intent. Strategic messaging has hardened into visible engagement. Diplomatic channels remain open, but they no longer dominate events. And at the center of global concern lies a narrow stretch of water between Iran and Oman. At its narrowest point, just 21 miles across, the Strait of Hormuz. Nearly 1/5 of the world's oil supply passes through this corridor each day. A substantial share of global liquefied natural gas exports follows the same route. For many economies, this is not an optional pathway. It is foundational infrastructure. This conflict is not solely about territorial or ideological rivalry. It is a stress test of the modern global system, an examination of how tightly interconnected economies respond when one of their most vital arteries comes under strain. Tonight, we assess the military realities, the market reactions, the geopolitical recalibrations, and the structural consequences now unfolding. Calmly, strategically, without exaggeration. On a global map, the Strait of Hormuz appears narrow and unremarkable. In the architecture of energy logistics, it is indispensable. Between 17 and 20 million barrels of oil transit this corridor daily. Gulf producers rely on it to reach global markets. Much of the world's spare production capacity is concentrated within this same region. The vulnerability is not new. During the 1980s tanker war, oil shipments were attacked repeatedly amid the Iran-Iraq conflict. And yet, despite intense hostility, full closure never materialized. What differs today is not geography, but capability and connectivity. Missile systems are more advanced. Drone warfare is more precise. Cyber operations now accompany kinetic force. Total closure of the strait would be operationally difficult, but systemic shock does not require total closure. It requires friction, delays, insurance withdrawal, escalating threat perception. The power of the strait lies not only in its oil flow, but in the leverage created by uncertainty. Open hostilities alter maritime calculations immediately. Commercial vessels operate under heightened risk protocols. War risk insurance premiums surge. Shipping companies reassess schedules. The strategic objective for global naval actors is not territorial dominance. It is continuity of commerce. The strait does not need to be sealed to be contested, and contested transit is sufficient to create economic tremors. Energy markets are highly responsive to geopolitical risk. When a primary supply route faces credible threat, oil prices adjust immediately. Strategic petroleum reserves can moderate short-term spikes, but reserves are finite tools. They provide breathing space, not permanent insulation. Markets can withstand shock. What they struggle to absorb is prolonged unpredictability. Duration more than intensity determines whether conflict becomes economic restructuring. Conflict in the Gulf triggers calculations far beyond the region. Systemic maritime collapse benefits no one. Energy interdependence creates an unusual paradox. Even rivals share incentive to prevent total breakdown. Short disruptions test resilience. Extended conflict reshapes architecture. This is not collapse, it is adaptation. Behind every barrel statistic stands a household. If oil prices remain elevated, transportation costs increase. Food prices follow, maritime security becomes domestic economics, quietly, systemically, persistently. History suggests that sustained total closure of major choke points is uncommon, yet uncertainty persists. The line between calculated restraint and unintended escalation is thin, and thin lines carry disproportionate consequence when global systems are tightly interconnected. The Strait of Hormuz is more than a shipping route. It is a symbol of the delicate architecture of global stability. War may begin regionally, but in a deeply interconnected system, consequences rarely remain confined. The strait is small, its leverage is immense, and in a world bound together by narrow corridors and shared dependencies, stability is never automatic. It is sustained deliberately.
Tehran wakes to a different sky. Before sunrise, currency traders in Dubai refresh their screens. The rial slips again. Oil futures in Singapore jump within minutes. In Brussels and Washington, secure rooms fill quietly. Phones vibrate, briefings begin. Airspace over parts of Iran narrows. Commercial routes shift south. Insurance premiums for tankers moving through the Gulf tick upward. Military radar systems across the region move to heightened monitoring. Not panic, not yet, but readiness. In apartment blocks across Tehran, Isfahan and Mashhad, families stare at television screens. The same announcement plays again and again. The supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, and several senior figures are confirmed dead following coordinated strikes. For nearly half a century, Iran's political system has revolved around a single axis of authority. Now, that axis is gone. The question is no longer about retaliation, it is deeper than that. What happens to a theocratic state built around clerical supremacy when its central figure disappears overnight? Tonight, we examine the leadership vacuum, the internal power struggle, and the possible futures facing Iran. Because the outcome will matter far beyond its borders. Since the 1979 Islamic Revolution, Iran's political system has fused elected institutions with clerical oversight. The supreme leader stands above the president, above parliament, above the courts. The position commands the armed forces and shapes foreign policy. It is not symbolic, it is decisive. Ayatollah Khamenei has held that position since 1989, 35 years of continuity in a region often defined by upheaval. Iran does possess a constitutional mechanism for succession, the Assembly of Experts, an 88-member clerical body tasked with appointing a new supreme leader. The procedure exists on paper. What is uncertain is how it unfolds under shock, external pressure, and sudden leadership loss. History offers different outcomes. The death of Ayatollah Khomeini in 1989 resulted in managed continuity. The collapse of Iraq's Ba'athist regime in 2003 produced fragmentation. The difference lies not in the moment, but in the institutions surrounding it. In a controlled outcome, the Assembly of Experts moves quickly. Within days, an interim clerical council is announced. Security forces deploy visibly. But without mass repression, state media emphasizes continuity. The Revolutionary Guard pledges loyalty to the constitutional process. Markets react cautiously. Oil prices jump briefly, then stabilize as tanker traffic continues. Diplomatic channels remain open, even adversarial ones. In this scenario, the Revolutionary Guard influences the choice of successor, but does not formally seize power. The system bends, but it does not break. Now imagine a different chain of events. The Assembly of Experts delays. Clerical factions leak rival claims. Protests expand beyond major cities. Security responses harden. Regional actors grow uneasy. Borders tighten. Surveillance intensifies. Oil markets react again. Shipping insurance rises. Airlines reroute. Here is the deeper question. What happens if authority fragments not at the edges, but at the center? In that environment, the Revolutionary Guard could step forward as the primary stabilizing force. A shift from clerical supremacy to overt military dominance. Beyond immediate turmoil lies a longer horizon. If Iran transitions toward stronger military authority, regional power balances begin to recalibrate. Neighboring states accelerate defense spending. The logic of deterrence sharpens. Energy markets adjust. Investment shifts. Strategic doctrines evolve. Moments like this quietly reshape international norms. Energy prices matter in charts. They matter more at fuel pumps. Nairobi, Mumbai, Berlin, Sao Paulo. Inside Iran, uncertainty weighs heavier. Currency volatility affects savings. Businesses hesitate. Families watch debates they cannot influence. The removal of a long-standing leader does not end a system overnight. It tests it. It reveals its depth, its fractures, its resilience. For Iran, this moment could reinforce continuity or accelerate transformation. For the region, the stakes lie in balance. For global markets, stability. For ordinary citizens, predictability. Power vacuums do not exist in isolation. They echo outward, through alliances, through economies, through perceptions of strength and vulnerability. Conflicts may begin with force, but what follows is shaped by choices. Deliberate, cautious, human choices. And those consequences travel far beyond the moment that created them. It begins with urgency. Carrier strike groups reposition in the Arabian Sea. Missile defense batteries activate across the Gulf. Oil traders in London watch futures climb before sunrise. Insurance rates for tankers inch upward. Commercial airlines redraw flight paths around contested airspace. In Washington, briefings stretch late into the night. In Tehran, state television projects resolve, while military convoys move quietly along desert highways. Social media fills with speculation. Families stock fuel, markets hesitate. The first exchange is sharp, limited, targeted. But as days pass, the question shifts. Not whether strikes occurred, not even who struck harder. The real question becomes, how long could this last? Because modern wars between major states rarely unfold according to initial plans. They expand, narrow, stall, escalate, freeze, and reshape themselves. Tonight, we examine the duration dynamics of a potential Iran-United States conflict, and what weeks, months, or longer would mean for the global system. A direct war between Iran and the United States would not resemble conventional invasions of the past century. Geography, force posture, and political objectives differ. Iran possesses significant missile capabilities, regional proxy networks, and influence stretching across Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen. The United States maintains extensive air, naval, and intelligence assets across the region, supported by alliances and advanced logistics. History shows that wars which begin as limited operations can evolve into prolonged campaigns. The 1991 Gulf War lasted weeks and achieved defined objectives. By contrast, the 2003 Iraq War shifted from rapid regime removal to years of insurgency. The difference was not only military capability, it was political clarity. In a contained scenario, the conflict remains limited. The United States conducts targeted strikes against military infrastructure. Iran retaliates through calibrated missile launches against regional bases. Avoiding civilian targets. Limiting escalation. Diplomatic channels remain open behind the scenes, often through intermediaries. Oman, Switzerland. Oil prices spike initially, but stabilize as shipping through the Strait of Hormuz continues. The campaign lasts weeks, perhaps a month. The war ends formally, but its aftershocks remain. Now consider a longer arc. Initial strikes expand. Objectives shift. Leadership rhetoric hardens. When conventional options narrow, asymmetric tools widen. Proxy groups increase activity across Iraq and Syria. Maritime harassment grows in the Gulf. Cyber operations probe financial systems and energy infrastructure. The battlefield expands beyond geography, into economics and cyberspace. In this scenario, Iran's strategy is not decisive victory. It is endurance, raising costs gradually. The conflict stretches into months, perhaps longer. If conflict extends beyond months, structural consequences appear. Regional alliances harden, defense budgets increase, missile defense networks expand. Globally, energy diversification accelerates. Europe pushes deeper into renewables. Asian economies expand strategic oil reserves. China and Russia recalibrate diplomatic positioning. Balancing influence, avoiding entanglement. Sustained oil price increases ripple through global economies. Transportation costs rise. Food production becomes more expensive. Manufacturing slows. Emerging markets feel the pressure first. Inside Iran, economic hardship deepens. Currency pressure intensifies. Infrastructure damage affects daily life. In the United States, war spending expands fiscal pressure. Public debate sharpens. What history suggests is that conflicts with unclear end states tend to last longer than anticipated. What current capability indicates is that both Iran and the United States possess the means to sustain operations beyond initial weeks. What remains uncertain is political will. Domestic tolerance for cost often defines duration more than battlefield momentum. What depends on leadership decisions is whether objectives remain limited or expand toward transformational goals. Escalation is neither guaranteed nor avoidable by default. It rests on communication, restraint, and perception. The margin between prolonged deterrence and widening war is thin. The trading floor is unusually quiet. Screens glow with numbers that move faster than voices can explain them. Oil futures climb in sudden jumps. Analysts lean toward their monitors, recalculating projections they finished only hours earlier. Across the world, in ministries and command centers, briefings begin earlier than planned. Advisors speak in measured tones. Satellite images are reviewed. Maritime routes are quietly reconsidered. In the Persian Gulf, commercial tankers slow as shipping insurers reassess risk. Pilots receive updated instructions. Airspace corridors narrow. Meanwhile, in homes thousands of kilometers away, ordinary people watch the evening news. Fuel prices scroll across the screen. Grocery costs appear beneath them. The connection between distant conflict and daily life becomes suddenly visible. History shows that wars rarely remain confined to the battlefield. Their consequences move through markets, supply chains, and human expectations. The central question emerges quickly. If conflict involving Iran disrupts global energy flows, how far could the shock travel? And how deeply could it reshape the price of food, fuel, and stability across the world? Today's episode examines the potential economic pathways of such a crisis, separating what history teaches us from what remains uncertain. Iran occupies one of the most strategically sensitive positions in the global energy system. Roughly 1/5 of the world's traded oil moves through the Strait of Hormuz, the narrow maritime passage connecting the Persian Gulf to global markets. According to the US Energy Information Administration, around 20 million barrels of oil per day pass through this corridor, close to 20% of global petroleum consumption. That geography alone ensures that instability in the region reverberates far beyond it. Historically, energy markets have reacted sharply to geopolitical shocks. The 1973 oil embargo, triggered during the Arab-Israeli War, caused global oil prices to quadruple within months. A decade later, the 1979 Iranian Revolution again disrupted supply and doubled prices in a matter of weeks. Those events were not identical to modern conditions, but they demonstrate an enduring pattern. Energy markets react not only to physical shortages, but to expectations of risk. The strategic motivations surrounding Iran are complex. Tehran views its regional posture and deterrence capabilities as essential to national security, after decades of sanctions and confrontation. Meanwhile, the United States, Israel, and several regional states view Iranian military expansion and nuclear ambitions as destabilizing. These competing perspectives shape policy decisions. Some analysts argue that a limited conflict would likely be contained quickly because all actors understand the economic consequences of prolonged disruption. Others counter that modern conflicts can escalate unintentionally, especially when multiple regional actors are involved. Both positions contain elements of truth. What remains clear is that the global economy today is deeply interconnected. Energy prices influence transportation, manufacturing, agriculture, and household budgets across continents. And when energy moves, food prices often follow. In the first scenario, tensions escalate into limited military confrontation but remain geographically contained. Initial strikes occur against strategic facilities or military assets. Governments issue firm statements while emphasizing that the conflict must remain limited. Diplomatic channels remain open, even if communication is indirect. Financial markets react immediately. Oil prices surge as traders price in uncertainty. Insurance premiums for tankers moving through the Gulf rise sharply. Some shipping companies temporarily reroute vessels or delay departures. Yet the physical flow of oil continues. Regional powers deploy naval patrols to secure shipping lanes, and international diplomatic pressure pushes for rapid de-escalation. Within weeks, markets begin to stabilize. Historically, energy markets have recovered relatively quickly from short disruptions. During the 2019 attack on Saudi Arabia's Abqaiq processing facility, roughly 5% of global oil supply was briefly interrupted, the largest sudden outage in modern history. Yet prices stabilized within weeks once production resumed. A controlled outcome would likely follow a similar pattern. Prices might spike temporarily, perhaps above previous highs. But strategic reserves held by major economies could be released to calm markets. The International Energy Agency maintains emergency stockpiles equivalent to roughly 90 days of imports among member countries. Even so, stabilization would not eliminate risk. The deeper uncertainty lies in how quickly confidence returns. Markets react not only to supply, but to expectations of future stability. And if confidence falters, temporary disruption can still ripple through global prices. The second scenario unfolds more gradually. Initial confrontation spreads beyond its intended boundaries. Regional actors feel compelled to respond, whether through direct involvement or proxy activity. Maritime security becomes increasingly fragile. Insurance costs for vessels moving through the Strait of Hormuz rise sharply. Some shipping companies withdraw altogether. Oil still exists, but the ability to move it safely becomes uncertain. Prices climb further. Energy markets operate on tight margins between supply and demand. A disruption of even 2 to 3 million barrels per day, only a small fraction of global production, can drive dramatic price swings if markets believe the shortage may persist. But energy is only the first ripple. Higher fuel costs raise transportation expenses across the global economy. Fertilizer production, which depends heavily on natural gas, becomes more expensive. Shipping prices increase. Farmers face rising costs for diesel, irrigation, and agricultural inputs. Food prices begin to rise months later. At this point, the ripple spreads from markets to households. In many developing economies, food already represents 30 to 50% of household spending. Even modest increases in global grain prices constrain family budgets and government subsidies. And here, the central uncertainty reappears. Could escalation be contained before reaching this point? Or could miscalculation push events further than any actor originally intended? History offers examples in both directions. The Iran-Iraq War of the 1980s included attacks on oil tankers, but never completely closed the Strait of Hormuz. Yet other conflicts, from World War I to more recent regional wars, demonstrate how quickly escalation can outrun expectations. This raises a critical question. When tensions rise in such a strategically vital corridor, who ultimately controls the pace of escalation? Beyond immediate market shocks lies a longer horizon. Even a temporary disruption could accelerate structural changes already underway in the global energy system. Major economies might move faster to diversify supply chains and reduce dependence on vulnerable shipping routes. Strategic petroleum reserves could be expanded. Investments in renewable energy, nuclear power, and domestic production might gain renewed urgency. In other words, the crisis could reinforce existing energy transitions. But structural shifts also carry geopolitical consequences. Energy exporters might seek new alliances and transportation corridors. Importing nations could pursue bilateral energy partnerships designed to bypass unstable regions. Naval presence in key maritime chokepoints could increase. History shows that energy crises often reshape global strategy. The 1970s oil shocks accelerated investment in North Sea production, reshaped Western energy policy, and prompted the creation of the International Energy Agency itself. A future crisis involving Iran could produce similar long-term adjustments. Yet such transitions unfold slowly. Infrastructure, investment cycles, and political agreements take years to build. Even determined governments cannot immediately replace the flows that currently move through critical maritime corridors. For that reason, structural change rarely eliminates vulnerability overnight. It merely redistributes it. Several realities are clear. Energy markets remain highly sensitive to disruptions in the Persian Gulf. Historical precedent shows that geopolitical shocks can produce rapid price spikes. It is also evident that modern economies are deeply interconnected. Energy prices influence transportation, agriculture, and inflation across the world. But uncertainty remains significant. We do not know how governments would respond in the early days of such a crisis. Strategic reserves could moderate price increases, or they might prove insufficient if disruption persisted. We cannot predict whether escalation would remain limited or expand through regional dynamics. Most importantly, leadership decisions matter. Moments of tension often hinge on restraint, communication, and the willingness of states to step back from confrontation. History shows both outcomes are possible. Conflicts begin with strategy. They begin with calculations of power, deterrence, and national interest. But their consequences travel along invisible pathways, through markets, supply chains, and the expectations of millions of people who never chose to participate. A tanker slowed in the Strait of Hormuz can influence a farmer deciding how much fertilizer to buy. A rise in fuel prices can reshape a family's grocery budget thousands of kilometers away. This is the paradox of the modern world. Local decisions produce global consequences. Energy routes connect continents, food systems cross oceans, financial markets transmit uncertainty at the speed of light. Which means that when tensions rise in a single maritime corridor, the effects rarely remain there. Conflicts may begin with force, but their consequences travel far beyond the battlefield. The airspace map updates first. Across aviation control centers from Doha to Dubai, red warning zones begin to appear across digital navigation screens. Flight paths bend away from contested corridors. Pilots receive new routing instructions. In Riyadh, security advisors gather around large tables covered with satellite imagery and economic briefings. Voices are calm, but the tone is unmistakably serious. Across the Gulf, oil terminals continue loading tankers beneath bright floodlights, but insurers are reassessing risk. Shipping companies are quietly reviewing contingency plans. Meanwhile, on the streets of Istanbul, televisions inside cafes broadcast breaking coverage. Analysts debate what the conflict could mean for the balance of power in the Middle East. The first effects of regional conflict rarely appear where the missiles land. They appear in airspace restrictions, in shipping routes, in diplomatic phone calls that begin earlier than planned. Because when tensions involving Iran escalate, the question extends beyond one country. It spreads across an entire regional system. The central question emerges quickly. If war involving Iran reshapes the strategic environment of the Middle East, how might Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and the Gulf states respond? And could the region's balance of power shift in ways that last for decades? Today's episode examines how such a conflict could redraw political alignments, economic partnerships, and security strategies across one of the most strategically important regions on Earth.
The Middle East has always been defined by shifting balances of influence. For decades, Iran and Saudi Arabia have represented two competing centers of regional power. One is a revolutionary republic seeking strategic autonomy. The other is a monarchy that has traditionally aligned closely with Western security partnerships. Their rivalry has shaped conflicts from Lebanon to Yemen. But this rivalry is not purely ideological, it is also strategic. Iran's geographic position gives it influence along several key regional corridors, from the Persian Gulf to Iraq and Syria. Saudi Arabia, meanwhile, controls the largest oil exporter capacity in the world and leads many of the Arab Gulf monarchies economically and diplomatically. Turkey introduces a third major actor. As a NATO member with a large industrial economy and one of the region's most capable militaries, Ankara operates with its own strategic priorities. Turkey often balances relations with Western allies, Russia, and Middle Eastern states simultaneously. Historically, wars in the Middle East have often reshaped regional hierarchies. After the 1991 Gulf War, the United States established a long-term military presence across Gulf states. The 2003 Iraq War altered the internal balance of power in Iraq and expanded Iranian influence in the region. Those events demonstrate a pattern. Regional conflicts rarely remain contained within national borders. They alter alliances, economic flows, and perceptions of power. Some analysts argue that modern economic interdependence makes large-scale regional war less likely. Others counter that the Middle East's overlapping rivalries create a system where escalation can involve multiple actors quickly. Both interpretations contain elements of truth. What remains clear is that Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and the Gulf states would face profound strategic choices if conflict involving Iran expanded. In the first scenario, conflict involving Iran remains limited in scope and duration. Initial military exchanges occur, but major regional powers exercise caution. Saudi Arabia increases defensive readiness while emphasizing stability in global energy markets. Gulf states coordinate security measures to protect shipping lanes and energy infrastructure. Diplomatic channels remain active behind the scenes. Turkey adopts a cautious position. Ankara has historically maintained complex relations with both Iran and Western partners. In a limited conflict scenario, Turkish leadership might prioritize mediation and regional stability rather than direct involvement. Financial markets respond quickly but stabilize once it becomes clear that energy infrastructure remains largely intact. Saudi Arabia's spare oil production capacity becomes particularly important in this environment. According to energy analysts, the kingdom has historically maintained the ability to increase output by roughly 2 to 3 million barrels per day during market disruptions. That flexibility could help calm global markets. Diplomatic initiatives might also emerge through regional forums or international mediation efforts aimed at preventing escalation. History provides precedent. During the so-called tanker war phase of the Iran-Iraq War in the 1980s, attacks on shipping increased dramatically. Yet, despite the danger, the Strait of Hormuz never fully closed. Global markets experienced volatility, but the system continued functioning. A controlled outcome today could follow a similar pattern. Tensions would remain high, military readiness would increase, alliances might tighten, but the regional order would remain broadly intact. Still, even a limited confrontation could leave lingering uncertainty, because once conflict begins in such a complex strategic environment, confidence becomes fragile. Initial conflict involving Iran begins to pull neighboring actors into the strategic calculation. Saudi Arabia faces growing pressure to respond more visibly, whether through defensive cooperation, expanded military coordination with allies, or increased regional leadership. Gulf states begin strengthening collective security measures. Missile defenses are activated. Naval patrols increase across critical shipping corridors. Intelligence cooperation intensifies. Turkey confronts a different dilemma. Ankara's geographic position connects Europe, the Middle East, and the Caucasus. Escalation across the region could affect energy pipelines, refugee movements, and trade routes that run through Turkish territory. At the same time, Turkey may see opportunity. Regional instability sometimes creates space for new diplomatic influence. And this is where the central question reappears. If conflict expands, could competing powers begin reshaping alliances across the Middle East itself? Beyond the immediate crisis lies a deeper question. What happens to the Middle East's balance of power after the conflict ends? Wars often accelerate strategic trends that were already underway. Saudi Arabia has spent the past decade expanding economic reforms and diversifying its international partnerships. A regional conflict could reinforce its role as a central, stabilizing energy supplier. Turkey may seek to expand diplomatic leverage between East and West, and Gulf states, particularly the United Arab Emirates and Qatar, have increasingly positioned themselves as global financial and logistics hubs. A prolonged conflict could intensify military investment across the region. Security cooperation agreements might deepen. Missile defense networks could expand. Naval presence across the Gulf and Eastern Mediterranean might increase. History shows how such shifts occur. The aftermath of the 1979 Iranian Revolution triggered decades of new security arrangements across the Gulf. military infrastructure expanded dramatically during the following decades. Structural changes today might follow a similar trajectory, but long-term consequences extend beyond military strategy. Regional states could accelerate diversification away from oil dependence. New trade corridors could emerge linking Asia, Europe, and the Middle East. In other words, conflict might reshape not only political alignments but also economic geography. And yet structural change unfolds slowly. Infrastructure projects take years, diplomatic trust takes even longer. Even after the crisis ends, its strategic echoes could continue shaping the region for a generation.
Northern Israel. From the hills overlooking the Lebanese border, small lights flicker in villages scattered across the valleys. Farmers close gates. Cars move slowly along narrow roads. But in command centers several kilometers away, screens glow with live satellite feeds. Officers monitor radar signatures. Drone patrols sweep across dark terrain. Military briefings begin earlier than scheduled. Across the border in southern Lebanon, similar vigilance unfolds. Observers track aircraft movements. Communications channels remain active through the night. Fighters move cautiously between fortified positions carved into hillsides. Meanwhile, televisions across the region replay the same developing headlines. Tensions involving Iran are rising. For Israel and Hezbollah, the question becomes immediate, because their frontier has always existed on a razor's edge. Short distances, heavy weapons, and decades of unfinished conflict. The central question now emerges. If a broader war involving Iran unfolds, could the Northern Front ignite a second battlefield? And how far could the consequences spread across the Middle East? The Israel-Lebanon frontier is shaped by history as much as geography. The modern confrontation emerged during the Lebanese Civil War and Israel's military presence in southern Lebanon. Hezbollah formed as a militia resisting occupation, but evolved into something far more complex, a hybrid force, political and military. The defining moment came in 2006. A cross-border raid triggered a 34-day war. Thousands of rockets struck northern Israel. Airstrikes hit across Lebanon. The war ended without a decisive outcome, but it changed everything. In a controlled scenario, tensions rise, but remain contained. Israel increases readiness. Air defenses expand. Reserve units mobilize. Hezbollah signals caution. Rhetoric intensifies. But large-scale attacks do not follow. Diplomatic pressure grows. Restraint becomes the priority. The border remains tense, but not explosive. Now consider a more dangerous path. Small incidents begin to multiply. An exchange of fire, a drone interception. Each event carries greater meaning. Missile launches increase. Retaliation follows. The cycle accelerates, and the battlefield expands beyond control. At this stage, who decides when it stops? If the Northern Front becomes a major war zone, regional consequences follow. Military postures shift, defense investments rise. Lebanon faces severe disruption. Infrastructure damage spreads. Alliances evolve. Regional strategies are reassessed. Beyond strategy lies human consequence. Towns near the border empty. Families relocate. Schools close. Across the border, uncertainty mirrors itself. Economies strain. Markets react. Daily life shifts. Borders may appear as simple lines on a map, but they carry layers of history, security, and human experience. The Israel-Lebanon frontier reflects this reality. If conflict spreads here, the consequences will not remain local. Because in a region where distances are short and rivalries long, escalation can travel far beyond the battlefield. And sometimes the most important question is not who begins the conflict, but who chooses to stop it. The first signals do not come from the battlefield. They appear on trading screens in Shanghai. Energy futures begin to move, subtle at first, then faster. Analysts lean closer, watching price curves shift in real time. In Moscow, briefings begin behind closed doors. Officials gather around long tables, reviewing intelligence summaries and economic projections. Voices remain controlled, the implications are not. Meanwhile, in ports across East Asia, tankers continue loading crude oil. Shipping routes are monitored more closely. Insurance risks update quietly in the background. Across global news networks, maps of the Middle East fill the screen. But the focus is no longer only regional, because when conflict involving Iran escalates, the question reaches the world's major powers. The central question emerges: if war intensifies, how might Russia and China respond? And how could their decisions reshape the global balance of power? Russia and China approach the Middle East differently. Russia's role reflects a long strategic tradition, from Cold War alliances to modern military projection. China's path has been more economic, focused on trade, energy, and long-term stability. Iran sits at the center of both strategies, a partner for influence, a supplier of energy. This is not an alliance, but it is alignment. In a controlled scenario, conflict remains limited. Russia calls for restraint. Diplomatic channels remain active. At the same time, opportunities are quietly assessed. Energy markets begin to rise. Revenue increases follow. China focuses on stability, ensuring energy continues to flow. Trade routes remain open. In this scenario, both powers stabilize the system. Now consider escalation. Conflict expands. Energy markets surge. Shipping risks increase. Russia's position becomes more strategic. Influence expands through coordination, but risk rises alongside opportunity. China faces a different pressure. Energy security becomes urgent. Supply uncertainty grows. And a critical question emerges: do great powers stabilize or intensify the conflict? Beyond escalation lies transformation. Energy systems begin to shift, supply routes diversify, dependencies change. China accelerates long-term infrastructure strategies. Russia strengthens its role as an energy supplier. Financial systems adapt, trade patterns evolve. These changes do not happen overnight, but they reshape the future. Economic effects spread quickly. Energy prices rise, transportation costs increase, supply chains tighten. For consumers, the impact is immediate: higher fuel costs, more expensive goods. For developing economies, the pressure is greater. Global systems adapt, but adaptation takes time. Power in the modern world does not operate alone. It moves through networks, energy, trade, diplomacy. A conflict in one region can trigger decisions across continents. Russia and China do not simply observe, they interpret, they respond. And through those responses, they shape the outcome. Because in modern conflict, power is not only about force, it is about influence and the ability to shape what happens next. The movement begins quietly, not with explosions, not with headlines, but with numbers. On trading floors in New York, London and Singapore, screens flicker as energy prices begin to shift. At first, the changes are small, then they accelerate. Analysts lean forward, phones ring more often. Across global shipping networks, route planners adjust trajectories. Some vessels slow, others wait. Insurance costs update in real time. Airspace authorities issue revised guidance. Flight paths curve away from areas now considered uncertain. Meanwhile, in homes far from the Middle East, the first signs appear differently. Fuel prices tick upward. Transport costs begin to rise. Groceries edge higher. The connection is not immediately obvious, but it is already in motion. Because when conflict involving Iran disrupts a system as interconnected as the global economy, the effects rarely stay confined to one region. They move through energy markets, through trade routes, through expectations. The central question emerges. If a war involving Iran reshapes global energy flows and financial confidence, could it trigger a broader economic slowdown? And how deeply could that impact reach into everyday life? Today's episode examines how modern economies transmit shock, how markets respond under pressure, and what history suggests about the consequences of geopolitical disruption. The global economy has faced energy shocks before, and each time the consequences have extended far beyond oil markets. In 1973, the oil embargo triggered by the Arab-Israeli war caused global oil prices to rise sharply, quadrupling within months. The result was not just higher fuel costs, but widespread inflation across advanced economies. A few years later, the 1979 Iranian Revolution again disrupted supply, contributing to another surge in oil prices and prolonged economic instability. These events revealed a critical pattern. Energy is not just another commodity. It is a foundational input across nearly every sector: transportation, manufacturing, agriculture, and logistics. When energy prices rise, costs spread. And when costs spread, inflation follows. Today's global economy is even more interconnected. Roughly 20% of the world's traded oil passes through the Strait of Hormuz, making it one of the most critical choke points in global trade. That concentration introduces vulnerability. If disruption occurs, even temporarily, markets respond not only to supply changes, but to expectations of risk. There is, however, an important distinction. Modern economies also have more tools: strategic petroleum reserves, diversified supply chains, and advanced financial systems. These provide some buffer against sudden shocks. Some analysts argue these buffers could prevent a severe global downturn. Others caution that high debt levels and already elevated inflation could amplify any new disruption. Both perspectives highlight the same underlying reality. The global economy is resilient, but it is not immune. Beyond immediate disruption lies a deeper transformation. Economic shocks often accelerate long-term structural change. A sustained crisis involving Iran could reshape global energy systems. Countries may accelerate investment in alternative energy sources, renewables, nuclear power, and domestic production. Supply chains could be redesigned. Companies may reduce dependence on single region sourcing, even at higher cost, to improve resilience. Financial systems may also evolve. Periods of instability often prompt reconsideration of global monetary arrangements, trade currencies, and payment systems. This does not happen overnight, but trends can accelerate. The 1970s energy crises, for example, led to lasting changes in energy efficiency, strategic reserves, and international coordination mechanisms. A future shock could produce similar adjustments. But structural change carries trade-offs. Greater resilience often comes at higher cost. More diversification can reduce efficiency, and transitions take time. In the short term, economies must operate within existing systems, even if those systems are under strain. Several realities are clear. The global economy remains highly sensitive to energy price fluctuations. History shows that geopolitical shocks can transmit quickly through inflation, trade, and financial systems. Modern economies have more tools to respond: strategic reserves, coordinated policy, and diversified supply chains. But uncertainty remains significant. We do not know how long a conflict involving Iran might last. We cannot predict how markets would react to sustained disruption. And we cannot fully anticipate how governments would balance competing priorities under pressure. What we do know is this: economic outcomes are shaped not only by events, but by decisions. And those decisions are made in real time, often under uncertainty. The signals are subtle at first, not visible in the sky, not announced in headlines. They appear in procurement reports, in policy discussions behind closed doors, in quiet shifts in defense strategy. In Riyadh, advisors gather to review long-term security assessments. Documents circulate across polished tables. The tone is measured. The implications are not. In Ankara, strategic planners evaluate regional developments with increasing urgency. Maps stretch across screens, showing shifting alliances and emerging risks. Across global intelligence networks, analysts begin to ask a familiar question, one that has shaped international security for decades. What happens when deterrence begins to change? Because nuclear decisions are rarely made suddenly. They emerge slowly, through perception, through fear, through calculation. Meanwhile, across the Middle East, populations follow unfolding events with growing awareness, not just of conflict, but of what might follow. The central question emerges: if a war involving Iran alters the regional balance of power, could other states begin pursuing nuclear capability? And could that process reshape the security architecture of the Middle East for generations? Today's episode examines the logic of deterrence, the risks of proliferation, and the long-term consequences of a nuclear shift in one of the world's most complex regions. Nuclear weapons have long occupied a unique place in international security. Since the mid-20th century, their primary function has not been battlefield use, but deterrence. The idea is simple in theory. If the cost of conflicts becomes too high, conflict becomes less likely. This logic shaped the Cold War. The United States and the Soviet Union developed vast nuclear arsenals. Yet direct confrontation between them never occurred. Mutual vulnerability created restraint. But proliferation introduces complexity. When more actors possess nuclear capability, deterrence becomes harder to manage. The Middle East has historically remained outside large-scale nuclear proliferation. Israel is widely believed to possess nuclear capability, though it maintains a policy of ambiguity. Other regional states have not openly developed nuclear weapons. However, Iran's nuclear program has altered the strategic conversation. Tehran maintains that its program is for peaceful purposes, while many international actors view its capabilities as a potential pathway to weaponization. This difference in interpretation shapes policy responses. Some analysts argue that even the perception of a potential nuclear capability can shift regional calculations. Others argue that strong international monitoring and diplomatic agreements can prevent proliferation. Both perspectives reflect ongoing debate. What remains clear is this: nuclear decisions are rarely isolated. They influence and are influenced by the actions of others. Beyond immediate escalation lies a deeper transformation. A nuclearized Middle East would represent a fundamental shift in global security architecture. Deterrence would no longer operate through a limited number of actors. Instead, multiple states with varying capabilities and strategic doctrines would interact within a shared space. This increases complexity, and complexity introduces risk. Communication becomes more critical. Misinterpretation becomes more dangerous. Crisis management becomes more difficult. Military doctrines would adapt. Missile defense systems would expand. Early warning systems would become central to national security planning. Diplomatic frameworks would also evolve. New agreements might emerge, focused on transparency, confidence-building measures, and risk reduction. History shows that nuclear systems can stabilize over time. The Cold War eventually produced structured arms control agreements and communication mechanisms designed to reduce accidental escalation. But that stability developed over decades. A new nuclear environment in the Middle East would begin without those established frameworks, which introduces a period of heightened uncertainty. Structural shifts also extend beyond security. Global non-proliferation efforts could face new challenges. If one region moves toward expanded nuclear capability, it may influence perceptions elsewhere. In that sense, regional decisions can carry global implications. Several realities are clear. Nuclear capability fundamentally alters strategic calculations. Perception plays a critical role in deterrence dynamics. And regional security environments influence national decision-making. But uncertainty remains significant. We do not know how regional actors would respond to sustained shifts in deterrence. We cannot predict whether diplomatic frameworks would adapt quickly enough to manage new risks. And we cannot fully anticipate how global powers would respond to regional proliferation. What remains consistent is this: nuclear decisions are rarely inevitable. They are shaped by leadership choices, international pressure, and strategic calculation. History shows that restraint is possible, but so is escalation. Power in the modern world is often measured in visible ways: military strength, economic scale, technological capability. But nuclear power operates differently. Its influence is not defined by use, but by presence, by perception, by the possibility it introduces into every calculation. A nuclear shift in the Middle East would not begin with a single moment. It would unfold gradually, through decisions made quietly, through strategies adjusted over time, through responses to actions taken elsewhere. And once those dynamics begin, they rarely remain confined to one region. Because nuclear decisions reshape not only security, but expectations. They alter how states interpret risk, how they define stability, how they prepare for the future. Which means that the question is not only whether such a shift could occur, but how the world would adapt if it did. Deterrence can prevent conflict, but it also changes the system in which conflict exists. And sometimes the most profound changes are the ones that unfold without a single shot being fired.
The signals do not arrive with sound. No explosions, no visible impact. They move silently, through cables, through servers, through code. In dark rooms, analysts watch screens filled with shifting data. Lines of code scroll faster than the eye can follow. Across digital maps, invisible connections pulse between regions. Data centers hum with constant activity, every signal monitored, every anomaly tracked. This is the battlefield, not physical, but digital. And when conflict escalates, it does not stay visible. It moves beneath the surface. Cyber conflict did not emerge overnight. It evolved, from early systems to global networks. Today, infrastructure depends on digital systems, power grids, oil facilities, financial markets. All connected, all vulnerable. Governments monitor threats constantly, tracking activity, analyzing patterns. Because in modern conflict, disruption does not require force, it requires access. In a controlled scenario, systems hold. Cyber defenses activate. Threats are detected, blocked, contained. Teams monitor networks continuously. Firewalls intercept malicious activity. Data centers remain stable. Systems continue operating. Energy flows. Markets function. Infrastructure remains secure. International coordination strengthens defense. Under this scenario, disruption is avoided. Stability holds. But escalation changes the equation. Networks begin to fail. Systems slow, then break. Power grids show warning signals. Lights flicker, then disappear. Airports lose coordination. Flights are delayed. Systems glitch. Banking networks freeze. Transactions fail. Access is lost. Oil facilities malfunction. Production slows. Supply is disrupted. The attack spreads, not through geography, but through connection. What happens when systems fail simultaneously? When disruption is no longer isolated? Because in a connected world, failure travels, and it travels fast. Beyond disruption lies transformation. Systems adapt, defenses evolve. Artificial intelligence monitors threats in real time. Countries build stronger digital barriers. Infrastructure becomes more secure. Global cooperation increases. Agreements form. Protocols expand. But complexity grows, and complexity introduces new risks. When systems fail, people feel it. Work stops. Access disappears. Businesses close temporarily. Airports slow. Travel halts. Hospitals face pressure. Families lose connection. Uncertainty spreads faster than information. Some realities are clear. Digital systems are essential, and they are vulnerable.
But uncertainty remains. We do not know how far disruption could spread or how quickly systems could recover. What matters most is response and decision. The modern world runs on connection. Invisible, constant, essential. When that connection is disrupted, the effects ripple outward, across systems, across economies, across lives. Because conflict is no longer confined to the visible. It moves through networks, through systems, through the foundations of modern life. And in that world, the most powerful disruptions are often the ones we cannot see.
What are your thoughts on today's analysis? We'd value your perspective. Share your insights respectfully in the comments below. Thoughtful discussion makes these conversations stronger. If you found this documentary informative and balanced, consider liking the video and subscribing for more in-depth global analysis. Until next time, thank you for watching.